Hello and welcome to the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US, a podcast in which we explore the mind-bending world of global supply chain, covering topics such as automation, innovation, unique identity, and more. I'm your co-host, Reed.
And I'm Liz.
And welcome to the show.
We have an exciting episode for you that we recorded with Forrester. You may have heard of them, the research organization. We spoke with Sucharita Kodali, all about the evolution and acceleration of e-commerce, how small, medium, and large businesses are flexing and adapting to the digital world and how sell things online, and the impacts of those who are early adopters versus late adopters on digital maturity. It's not as linear as I guess I thought it would be. It's so important to focus on the fundamentals before you run to that new shiny thing. What is your product description? What are all those basic information pieces that consumers want? And know your customer. What are they looking for and what information is the most important for them to have in front of them? And make sure your people, internal and external, all those folks are aligned. That's really key for success. There's a lot of different folks within organizations and e-commerce is only one part of it. So as people are talking, it just makes a lot of sense to keep them all involved. I really hope you enjoy this episode. Sucharita, we're so excited to have you here today. You do a lot of research work at Forrester around e-commerce, omnichannel research and retail, consumer behavior and trends just all over the online shopping space. Can you level set us on your background and what brought you to Forrester?
Yeah. So, I've been at Forrester now for over 15 years. So, been here for a while doing a lot of what you just described. But I landed here because I was in the retail industry before. So I'd worked for about 10 years at different kinds of retailers, big box stores, department stores, brand manufacturers, e-commerce. And all of that is what led me to be a retail analyst at Forrester.
And when you say retail analyst, can you just share with me what that means?
So we publish, the main business of Forrester is we publish reports. So I like to describe it, it's a combination of academia, journalism, and consulting. So it's a lot of different disciplines, but ultimately companies buy our research reports. So a lot of what I do is I spend time researching the background for those reports and then ultimately writing those reports. And then, kind of a non-trivial amount of time too is spent sort of in the public domain talking about that research or giving speeches on that research. But for the most part, it's doing the research and analyzing different data sets. Some of those could be data sets that other companies have shared with us. In many cases, it's data sets that we've acquired through surveys or other observational sources.
I love how you put it as it's a combination of academia, journalism, and consulting. I've never heard that said before, but it crystallized it for me. And so today we're here, we're talking about the speed of transformation, and you've been on both sides of this, on the retail side and then now on the analyst side, and which is just a wonderful combination. So let's talk a little bit about e-commerce here. And e-commerce has been around for a really long time. The COVID has helped accelerate certain sectors to jump more into e-commerce. But how has this growth been different in the small, medium, and large businesses? Or has it been similar across all three? Is there any type of overlap between small, medium, and large businesses as they address this shift? I mean, personally, I see some of these small businesses, they just jump right in and they jump into this e-commerce and they're doing things and they're nimble and agile and quick and it's a real advantage for them. But some of the larger companies, they have established brands and the way they go about it might seem straightforward, but it may be a lot harder for them or it may be a lot easier. There's a lot of misnomers out there. And then is there really a medium size? Because it's funny because we talked to folks. We've had some folks on the show where they're $100 million, $200 million companies, and they're two people, right? And they're outsourcing everything. So how do you really define small? So that was a lot that I unpacked. So feel free to just comment wherever you like, but we just want to kind of get your perspective on it.
Yeah, I would say that certainly a lot of small companies gained share during the pandemic. There's no doubt about that. And there were, solutions like Shopify and BigCommerce and others that help facilitate a lot of those small companies. Could be somebody with a boutique shop that decides to sell online now, or it could be people that just decided to hang an online shingle. And there's no doubt that sector absolutely grew to the tune of billions of dollars through the pandemic. But I'd also say that a lot of the large companies also leaned more heavily into e-commerce. I mean, that's where you saw a lot of click and collect offerings and buy online, pick up in store offerings, and a lot more maturity on that front. I mean, people have been talking about things like buy online, pick up in store for like 20 years, and it didn't really get to be better until the pandemic. And even now, it's still a work in progress for a lot of retailers, but it definitely at least was more of an area of focus, and there's no turning back from that. And so I would say that e-com grew through the pandemic, and everybody was a beneficiary of that. That mid-market, that's an interesting question. I mean, you're right. It could be anybody, right? It could be smaller retailers. It could be a lot of these venture-funded companies that kind of turbocharge their growth with other people's money. And, if anything, that's probably the sector that has been the most challenged, because they may not have as much in the way of funding to help continue their growth, and they get squeezed on both sides, right, by companies that are more well-known on the large side and maybe more competitive and potentially even more innovative on the small side.
Yeah. I recently read an article about aggregators, and aggregators are these companies that buy multiple brands and try to scale them through efficiencies, so they already have a process in place. But the article basically said a lot of those companies were growing through acquisition, and now acquisition is really going to slow down because there's only so many companies you can buy, and now you're really going to have to do the work, and you're really going to see the separation with these aggregators, where some of them are really going to take off and others are going to kind of, for a lack of a better term, die on the vine because they don't have the business processes in place to really do that work. Because this, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and a lot of their strengths right now is acquisition, speed of acquisition, and incorporation. But then it's going to be, well, you're going to turn into a real conglomerate or a real conglomerate of brands, and how do you handle that? So that seems to be like that middle to large space. It's unique. And then we have the folks in the food business, where the grocery stores, they really dabbled in this. And I love that you called it click and collect. I haven't heard that a lot. I've always been hearing this BOPUS, which I'm like, this sounds silly, buy online, pick up in store. I get it, but I'm like, BOPUS. I like click and collect. I'm going to stick with that one from now on.
It's easier to say, cleaner.
It feels more elegant than BOPUS.
So I have a question. We were talking about, the different sized organizations, and Reed and I had been chatting with some folks recently. And it kind of was a mind shift for me, because we talk about these brands who may be getting into the online space, the e-commerce space, but they're very known, but they're new to e-commerce. So they're newer organizations from their e-commerce focus. And then you have organizations maybe that start with an e-commerce facing mechanism to their customers. What kind of challenges overall do companies face when they start building this e-commerce business? And how do they prioritize all the different things that they can be doing Are they thinking about just getting the product to the consumer? Are they thinking about marketing? Are they thinking about inventory management so that they know as consumers are ordering something, they'll be able to fulfill it? I mean, there's a lot of things. How do they move through all of the things to be successful?
Yeah, there is a lot. I mean, all of the above, right? I mean, there's not a single challenge, and there's not a single challenge that's more onerous than any other challenge. And these challenges evolve and shift. Right? I mean, you take even just something like marketing, and marketing evolves because there are new ways of marketing to customers. I mean, it was Google 20 years ago, then Facebook 10 years ago, now TikTok, and, kind of changes to cookies. And, I mean, so they're constantly, and now retail media, and, so everything is constantly changing. And that's just one part of it. You look at inventory management, and, you could be plagued by supply chain issues. You could, decide or invest in things like marketplaces and drop ship, or you could, decide to fill from stores or partner stores or suppliers or wherever the various destinations where inventory may be. So everything is an issue. Almost everything is a decision point. And it's complex. And, it is different companies have, approach the, different companies approach e-commerce in different ways. Typically, the digitally native companies, well, I won't even say anything that's typical about the digitally native companies because there have been so many different ones. I mean, there are ones that have shallow inventory. There are others that are marketplaces. There are others that may have multi-categories and multiple categories and lots of different brands. And I mean, they all have a host of different challenges and problems. The late movers, let's take companies like Zara or H&M. I mean, these are companies that were very well known in the offline world, or even grocers, and then they decide relatively late in the maturity of e-commerce that they'll start. They'll lean more heavily into online sales. Their issues are, in addition to all of the things we cited, their issues then are also legacy platforms, and it could be organizational dramas with respect to whether or not everybody in the company is even on board with a new channel for sales execution. So I mean, it's not easy, and kind of if it's easy for anyone, I would question, or if anyone says it's easy, I would question, kind of whether or not they're telling the truth, because it's hard, and it's hard for every type of business for a variety of different reasons.
Wow, that's some great insight there. I just made a note of just the people alignment, internally. When you have traditional businesses and they need to make change, we all know that change is constant, but change is difficult, and everyone changes at different times. Right? Bleeding edge adopters, early adopters, mid adopters, late adopters, and you have that within your own companies as well too. That was a nugget that I took. I want to piggyback on that question just a little bit. Are there any must-haves that customers need to do, or companies need to do today for their customers? Right? Customers are, BOPIS, click and collect, right? Really got an infusion the last couple of years, right? So it's almost like if you're online and you're not offering this click and collect service, it seems to me that you're kind of a little bit behind. That's just my personal, no data behind this, just a personal observation. But are there any must-haves? Like if you're doing e-commerce today, these are just some fundamental things you need to make sure that you're covering off on.
I mean, yes, no question that there are lots of things. I'm trying to think about what's an easy way to summarize it, because, there are probably like 200 things that are, expected that people need to check the box on. Probably the most basics are, speed of download and availability of your website. And those are like basic IT metrics. Like, if your site is hanging and content isn't loading, or, the pages are really slow, or it's really difficult to get from one page to the next page. Those are kind of table stakes, and those are going to be hugely problematic for driving a successful business. There are so many things on, kind of best, just kind of table stakes on the product detail page. It could be the number of photos and, basic product information and, kind of fully loaded price, and there are a handful of things that people consistently say are the most important things. A lot of them, you'd probably be surprised. It would be things like fully loaded price. It is things like the date of delivery. Like, I think that's an interesting one, because to this day, a lot of retailers don't offer that. They may say, oh, this is going to ship in 3 days, but it's like, well, what does that tell me about when this item is going to actually arrive? And I think that's a standard that was set by Amazon a long time ago, where they would tell you on the product detail page, like, order it now and you'll get it by Saturday, or whatever day that they're making that commitment to. People now have come to expect that. And but yet so many merchants still don't offer that level of detail, and it hurts them, because it's much easier to go to and purchase the product that you're looking for at the merchant that does make that promise, as opposed to somebody who may be able to get it to you in the same amount of time, but isn't willing to commit to it on that particular page. So there are lots of things that I would say. One thing, though, I think that people have a mistaken notion of, that is that it's table stakes, is really fast shipping or same day delivery. And this is something that we've gone around and around on, where people are like, oh my gosh, it's super important that I have same day delivery, or, I have 2-day delivery. And time again, shoppers tell us that they would rather have it free than have it in 2 days. So that is more important. But then, if you're not going to have it in 2 days, just tell the shopper when you're going to have it. Is it going to be 5 days or 6 days or however long? Because that's all they want. And, merchants have often just, kind of taken the wrong lesson from kind of some of the execution of leaders like Amazon.
That's very interesting. The 2-day versus knowing when it's going to come, right? In other parts of my life, there's kids' schools and the kids' extracurricular activities and stuff, and I've been preaching this for 15 years. The most important thing is consistency and predictability, so that families can plan around that. And it almost seems a very similar thing here. It's like, whether it's 2 days or 4 days, whatever you say it's going to be, I want it to be. Versus, this is going to ship in 3 days. Well, that means it's going to ship in 3 days. That doesn't mean I'm getting it
Exactly.
in day 4 or getting it in day 5. It could be I get it day 10. And then one last thing, because way back in the 90s, I actually was working for Cisco Systems, and we were setting up lots of routers and switches and firewalls, and working with Sun Microsystems and Oracle and Veritas and all these other companies to help companies get online, right? And run stores and run businesses online. This is back in the late 90s, the .com craze, if you will. And all and only thing we talked about was speed. You had 2 seconds, eyeballs on page, and if your page didn't load. I was surprised to hear you say that. Here it is, 2022. That's still an issue. Is there anything specific that you're aware of that people are doing, like investing in wrong types of technology, or just kind of adding too many things to a page? And if not, I understand it's a technical aspect, but it seems that people are still having that problem with slow speeds, or they build a website for a desktop not realizing 98% of their users are on the phone.
Yeah. And, I mean, I don't know that I have a single answer for, why every site may, or a single answer that kind of resolves the question for everybody. But I do think that there's more complexity in development. And I was just talking to a retailer the other day where their mobile app was much faster than their mobile website, and their desktop website as well was, their pages would just hang. And I think that they just had too many, they were replicating too much of the content in, for different screens and different types of users. And they probably just needed to simplify things. And the code was, in their case, likely just too heavy, particularly for desktop and mobile web. So I think that one needs to go through and kind of that answer is going to vary from company to company. But, if you're noticing, or your customers are telling you that, kind of the site's not fast enough, or you even see it in your metrics, like your conversion rate is not at industry standard, that is probably an indication that there's something wrong with the customer experience on your pages that's leading to the problems that you're seeing. So I think that's definitely a factor. But at the same time, though, I mean, there are so many things that they've been issues for 20 years and people haven't resolved. I mean, I was just talking to somebody that 80% of retailers are still looking at marketing measurement as something we call last click attribution, which we've known for 20 years is like the worst way to measure marketing. But yet it is the prevailing method of still how you measure the value of digital marketing. And oh, by the way, the biggest beneficiary of that is Google. So, I mean, but has anyone changed?
What is that market measuring again? You said 80% are still doing it, but we've known that what kind of
last click attribution, which is you click on something and then you go buy, immediately after, or you go buy within, it's not necessarily immediately after, it can be like a month later, but kind of that was the last thing that you saw. The last marketing touch point that was measurable that you saw was a Google search page, and therefore Google gets credit for it. And the most egregious part of it is that, so you'll see these ads, like I'll go look for American Airlines on Google, and there's an ad that American actually bought. I'm just using this hypothetically. I'm not,
understood.
Understood. But kind of American, has an ad for itself on the page where I typed in American Airlines, and so that we call that branded. We call those branded search terms. And those are some of the best performing, supposedly in marketing, search terms that are out there, which is it's not really incremental, but, yet Google gets credit for driving revenue to American for that purpose.
But they already had the brand recognition because I already knew everything and I typed it into a Google search, but Google's getting credit for driving it back to them, but we already went to them and they're paying to be right.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And that is the conundrum with last click attribution, is that everybody knows that's what it is, but yet nobody wants to change it to something better.
Second gold nugget that I took from today's conversation. Liz, I know we're going to be here for a long time, but we don't have forever. So Liz, I know you have.
Yeah, no. And my next question actually kind of stems from what you just talked through, except I don't know if it actually is a thing. So I was going to ask you about a phrase that you use, digital maturity. But it sounds like digital maturity can mean different things, because something that the market was using 20 years ago hasn't seemed to mature, right? But what does digital maturity really mean from your perspective?
That's a great question. And I think, I'm going to go back to an age-old framework of, people, process, technology. And I think that when a company is truly digitally mature, every part of every aspect of the people, that they have, these are I mean, they're hiring in a more sophisticated way. These are, people who are trained and understand the latest and greatest approaches. They are coding for, whatever are the cutting edge devices and touch points. They're looking at things like multi-touch attribution. They have more sophisticated ways of executing every part of what they're doing. And I think that's how I would define, kind of digital maturity. And I mean, often the outcome is that more of the company's business is traceable to digital touch points. That's often an outcome, is, like 70 or 80% of all of your touch points are coming through digital means, and, or they may be self-service or, kind of something that is that can be tied to that. But the way that you get there is often because you've invested in the right people, and, kind of you have really seamless, agile processes, and, kind of you're much more sophisticated with your development versus digitally immature companies, which probably see less sales digitally, but then they also tend to have more manual processes and are just not as focused on channels like e-commerce.
So it's a conscious decision, really, if you're going to be digitally mature, to build all of that in together, the right people, the right process, the right technology. You're leaning into that.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. Excellent. We see lots of trends that come about, and, people are always like trying to keep their eye on trends. And sometimes trends are worth jumping into, and other times trends are just distractions because it just goes so quick. Are you seeing this? Are there any distractions that you're noticing, if any, today, right now, that people are leaning into? You kind of hinted at it before with 2-day shipping. It's not table stakes. You can have later, shipping, just as long as we know when it's going to arrive. Don't tell me it's going to ship in 3 days and then it goes into the ether and we don't know when it's actually coming, but it doesn't have to be 2 days. Are there any other trends that you're seeing that might be distractions for folks right now?
Metaverse, crypto, Web3, and I've tried to, I've tried to have people explain, kind of all aspects of those things to me. And I think that there are big believers, and there are a lot of really smart people who are believers in the metaverse. But I don't know that most companies, most Fortune 500 companies that have business that is not, kind of their business itself is not technology, that they really have a lot of that, kind of that there's much that the metaverse or even crypto is going to add to them. And it's even unclear what Web3 may do for them. And what it seems to me is that there are a lot of companies that feel that they must jump on board because they're going to miss the boat if they don't. And I think that is misguided, and it is it's FOMO in its kind of at its heart. And what people need to recognize is that if and when the metaverse does take off, that you will have time to jump on board. You don't need to be the first company to do it. And there probably is not a whole lot to be gained from being the first company to do that. I mean, we don't even know what format it's going to ultimately take. Is it going to have any utility beyond gaming? It's unclear. We know that Mark Zuckerberg thinks that it's going to be much more than gaming, but I don't think that there's any evidence yet to suggest that it will be. So given that, there are so many more things that every business needs to focus on. I just listed off a whole bunch of them, earlier on, this recording. So, kind of focus on that stuff. Like, don't worry about these things that most people don't even know how to use, or much less even care about.
It almost sounds like conversations I have with a lot of student athletes is focus on the fundamentals before you try to do the new trick. It's like you can't do calculus before you learn, fundamental addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. You can't jump to calculus or advanced organic chemistry without learning the fundamentals or the basics. And by the time you get down the fundamentals or the basics, Pluto may be a planet again, I don't know, like things are changing, that's great to
hear. Exactly. And I, and that's something that I think is really, really important to recognize too, is that, a lot of the hype and, these are often get rich quick schemes that people have a vested interest in trying to sell to the rest of us.
So one last kind of question to wrap this up. If you were giving advice to organizations, a startup, a medium-sized business, a larger business, what would you tell them to do to be successful? And I know this whole conversation has been around what to do, but what are like those couple things to focus on to be successful?
I don't know that there is one answer for everybody, but I think that every business needs to ask itself, what's most important to my customers? And am I doing what is most important to for my customers? And, am I delivering something they don't care about, or am I, kind of truly addressing the things that are friction points? And if you address the things that are friction points, I think that is how you differentiate yourself, and that's how you win share. But it's really, really important to put yourself in the shoes of your customers. It's important to understand what are the moments that matter to your customers, and ask yourself, are you better than your competitors in addressing those points of those moments that matter the most?
That's awesome. So a little bit of KYC, know your customer, and look from the outside in. I think we all need to do that more and more. And I think what we also oftentimes forget is that our customers change, right? They not intentionally, they just do. They change. It happens.
Right.
This morning,
and to be on top of that, and to kind of be very sensitive to when kind of their desires may change, their demographics may change, their expectations change.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we have to jump to our last two questions here, which we ask all of our guests, and I'll go with the first one. And this can be anything you want, but we always want to know, what's your favorite technology today? Something that you use for personal or business or whatever, or even maybe you're not using it, but you're just enamored by this technology. It's your favorite technology today.
So there are a couple that I think are interesting. I have gotten, I'm kind of really interested in composting, but I'm not a big composter. So I'm fascinated by these like countertop composting solutions like, Vitamix and others have. So I think that is one that is great and fantastic and so valuable. Another is, kind of also in the kitchen is these portable induction cooktops. So I've always had my eye on a larger induction cooktop, but, didn't want to like completely change out all my cookware. But this was like an entry point into getting into induction cooking without having to, kind of reconfigure a huge part of your kitchen.
Awesome.
That is very cool. That is very cool. This is our next and last question. What blows your mind at home, whether you can, Because the composting, that countertop composting kind of blows my mind. I was watching a video on it and they put all the stuff in and then it turns to dirt like overnight. It's pretty cool. But what blows your mind that is out there either today or something you've experienced in your life years ago?
Well, Liz, I think it depends on what do you mean by blowing my mind? Like blowing my mind and like, I can't believe that this is happening, but not in a good way. Like, I can't believe it blows my mind that, most people don't vote or whatever. So there's a lot that's in that camp. But my hunch is that you're asking me about what's interesting and fascinating. And I think, I'm sort of fascinated by, of all the things that we use AI for, I haven't seen a ton of it being used to try to make the climate, to change, even to, what do I want to say is like almost manipulate climate in a way that is favorable to humanity.
Seeding clouds for more rain.
Exactly. Cloud seeding. Exactly. And I mean, that's that's probably the closest, kind of exactly that is like, generating rains in drought-like conditions. But even thinking of, kind of if all of the world's moisture and water is, kind of a cycle. We always talk about like every drop of water is like billions of years old, right? I mean, it's a cycle. Why are we not better at being able to manage it? Why are we not, we have managed and captured and, kind of sorted through like so much of our personal information and data points and whatnot. Like, why haven't we done that with every drop of water that is already out there? And that, kind of, and I would just hope that, kind of more of our energy and intellectual capital would go to, kind of solutions like that versus trying to, read my mind and, kind of send, kind of useless ads to me.
Right. Or ads to you after you've already purchased the product. You'll see that for a week after you've purchased the product. Well, Sucharita, this has been fantastic. And I think that, from the composting and the induction, the portable cooktop, it sounds like we could have a lot more conversations in your kitchen around some of this. And maybe even Liz and I could bring some wine or something else to continue the conversation. But for those that have listened, I just want to summarize just a couple of things. Throughout the conversation, I've made a couple little marks. And one was people alignment within your organization is a key component to being successful. I mean, otherwise you're just going to be, fighting each other. And that kind of comes back to your digital maturity piece as well, as the people, process, and procedure, and having everyone aligned and moving towards that. Digital maturity means something different for everybody, and everyone can be at different stages. But the people part, it crystallized for me because I see it. We were having discussions internally about things where I'm like, I did that 20 years ago. Like this should be table stakes, but the other folks haven't done it. They've never done it. So there's a learning curve there. So thank you for sharing that. Shipping is important, but 2-day is not a requirement. You shared that your studies and people, and last click attribution is another one. And know your customer. You want to be really good at e-commerce? Know your customer. Ask them what they want. Make sure that you're staying on point with those things. Sucharita, we can't thank you enough. We could have spent a lot more time, but we're kind of out of time for today. And really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US. If you enjoyed today's show, you can